Today's webinar is Making Your Mark, Transitioning from School to Work. And what I want to, well, before I get into the webinar, let me just tell you a little bit about my background. I'm an MBA graduate from the Georgia Institute of Technology, and I've worked abroad in several countries. So I've worked in Spain and Portugal, as well as several countries in Latin America. And in those roles, I was an HR consultant for corporate America, so recruiting international and bilingual, not only MBA students, but also undergraduate business and engineering students. And I also was a career consultant in European business schools as well as U.S. business schools. And in those roles, I did a lot of international travel, meeting with companies in the Asian markets and the European markets, and Latin American markets, and the U.S. market. Currently, I'm finishing up 2 books. One is called Don't Waste Time Applying Online, and the other is Journey to the Hiring Manager. And these books are based on my experience as a recruiter and as a career consultant, working with hundreds and maybe thousands of MBA students and undergraduate students, and as well as meeting with companies all over the world and really getting insight into learning about what it takes to get hired in today's market. Recently, this year in 2011, I started my own consultancy called Voice of the Job Seeker, and basically it is to work with job seekers and organizations on improving the recruitment process. So with that said, let's get into today's webinar. As you make that transition from school to work, the first step to starting your career is to choose the right employer. Okay, so every school graduate falls into 1 or 2 broad categories. You're either planning to work for a company or you're planning to start a company. So today I'm going to talk about the graduates who are planning to work for a company. Given the current economic crisis, job security has become somewhat of an oxymoron. It's an antiquated concept, if you will. And even the companies that have been ranked as ideal employers or as best places to work, they've even shredded thousands of college-educated graduates over the past few years. So it really is in your best interest to make the transition from school to work in a strategic way and to choose your employer wisely based on selected criteria. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, before you can begin even thinking about choosing an employer, you need to know your value add. And this is a big challenge for a lot of school leavers, if we want to call them that, and even professionals. Basically, the question is, why should I hire you? Okay, that's the basic question. Okay, why should a company hire you? And if you want to go deeper, you really need to ask, what are your value-adding features and benefits that are desired by an employer? Now, many graduates are unable to articulate an answer to that question. But if I ask the question, tell me what is the iPhone's value-adding features and benefits, they can answer that without hesitation. Okay, so it's quite amazing. When I ask people to tell me what their own, value add is in terms of features and benefits, they're not able to really communicate that. But as soon as I ask about a product, okay, when we look at a product like the iPhone, people can really discuss without any hesitation why this particular iPhone is of value to them and all of the benefits and features that it has. And so you have to ask yourself, why is that? Okay, why is it that I can communicate the features and benefits of a product, but I can't communicate the features and benefits of myself, of my value add? Okay, if you look at what Apple has done, they positioned the iPhone to be part and parcel of your daily routine. I mean, from your social life to your professional life, they have found a way to make sure that every little thing it does, all the little apps it has, it integrates into your life, okay? And for you, you really need to look at yourself and say, well, I have to become a brand. I have to understand my value add. I have to understand what is it that is distinct and credible about me that would interest an employer, okay? Now, that's the first step, okay? So basically what you're trying to do is look at the combination of your personal and professional benefits as they pertain to a distinct value to a prospective employer, okay? And you have to look at why is this important. Well, think about it. If you don't know your value add, okay, think about it. If you don't know your value add, then there's no way that an employer can know your value add, okay? So your value add is only as good as you're able to communicate it, okay? So that's why before we can begin anything, before we can begin, transitioning from school to work, before we can, really step foot in a company's door, the first step is to understand what you can bring to the companies that you desire to work for, okay? So if you look at how knowledge of your value add will position you with the types of companies that you're looking at, think about it this way too. Look at it from an opposite perspective. Your objective is to choose the right employer, okay? Choose the types of employers where they have the types of challenges and problems that you are uniquely able to solve. You won't know that if you don't really know your value add, okay? Your value add is your career brand, okay? So never forget that. Never think about a product brand, how the Apple iPhone is designed to solve specific challenges and problems for, consumers and business people alike. Then you need to have a career brand that is specifically designed to solve challenges for the types of companies that you want to work for. Now, if we look at it in the opposite way, if you choose the wrong employer, that can have disastrous consequences on your career and on your future earnings, okay? So think about it this way. When you chose your university, there was a reason why you chose the type of university that you wanted to study at, because it could affect your education as well as your job prospects going forward. So you have to look at, choosing employers in the same way. And when you know your value add, the good thing about it is it keeps you from making the wrong decisions, okay? So when you know what you have to offer and you know exactly what types of problems and challenges you're able to solve, then you're going to choose the types of companies. You're going to choose the types of businesses that have the types of problems and challenges that you are able to solve. So you're not going to choose companies that you really have no business working at, okay? Because you won't feel comfortable there. You'll feel that you're not using the skills and the abilities and the assets that you have to your maximum advantage, okay? So if you have an MBA or you have an engineering degree or, finance or whatever your degree is in, the last thing you want to do is to let these newfound skills and abilities go to waste, okay? So it doesn't mean that you have to work in this specific function that you got a degree in, but being in a university environment, you learned a lot of things about yourself and you learned a lot of things about what you can offer to companies. And the challenge now is to put that together in a package so that you're able to select the right companies and you're able to ask the right questions beforehand before you choose the employer that you want to work for. When you don't know your value add, the bad thing is you don't even know what questions to ask, okay? I've seen this many times. I've seen smart people graduate or even before they graduate, they don't really know what they can do. They know they're smart, and that's not a question. I mean, there's no question about that. They're smart. There are things that they can do that are above average, above the norm, but they don't know how to package that into a solution that a prospective employer would value. And so what I'm trying to tell you today is that when you begin this transition from school to work, you have to know what it is that you're going to bring to that company, okay? Because that is going to dictate how you start, at the company, what type of position you start in, your future career opportunities. It's going to dictate a lot throughout the arc of your career, and not just with one company, but multiple companies, okay? Because we have to look at in today's environment, it's very likely, and statistics have already shown this, that you're going to work at multiple companies throughout your career. So you won't have the luxury of the old, generations of, the baby boomers and people who could say, oh, I worked at one company and I retired and I put in my 30 years and I can just sit back and relax. Well, that just doesn't work anymore. So you can expect to change employers. So your ability to know your value add and to know that your value add would change over time, because as you learn new skills, as you learn new abilities, you're going to change as technology changes. You're going to change as society changes. You're going to change as consumer tastes change. And as you adapt yourself, you'll need to see if your adaptation is in line with the company's adaptation. What you'll find is a lot of companies don't always adapt to changes in the global environment as quickly as some of its employees. So you're going to have to make those decisions for yourself and learn how to choose the employers that will value someone with your profile, because if you try to wait on a company to do it for you, then the results may not always be what you want. Now, let's look at when you understand your value add and your career brand, you need to be comfortable with it, okay? Look at companies. Companies spend millions of dollars a year on research on defining the value add and brand attributes of their products and services. Shouldn't you spend the proportionate effort defining yours? So let's move on to the next slide.
So Roderick, before we move
yes,
on,
I'm sorry.
we just had a question come in that's pertaining to someone's value add. So should someone's value add match the company's posted job description, or should it still kind of just reflect your own personal background and experience?
That's a great question. That's what I recommend is that, independent of job descriptions, define your value add first, okay? Define, and the way you do that is really, and when I talk about value add, I really talk about your career brand. And there are a number of ways to do that. So you want to validate, what you do well through 360-degree feedback, and that can be done through your peers, former coworkers, staff at whatever university you may have recently left or currently are at and about to leave. There are certain psychometric tests you can use, but you want to get as much anecdotal evidence and subjective and objective evidence that really validates what you do well. You want to be able to have at least 3 things that people say, you know what, this is what you are good at. This is what you're really exceptional at, these 3 things. Then that makes your job easier in terms of looking at the types of companies that value people like you, because if you keep up with business news and keep up with blogs and what's going on with your particular target companies, you're going to know that there are challenges that are facing Google, for example, that are the same challenges that are facing Apple and Yahoo and Cisco. So you start to get an idea of, okay, here are the companies in my target group. Now here's what I can do for them. So okay, let me see if they have any types of jobs fitting what I can do. What we usually find is that they probably won't have something specific for you, and then that's another strategy, is to learn how to create a job for yourself, learning how to get to the hiring manager and propose solutions for challenges that they have. Because the biggest flaw oftentimes students think that the companies are all knowing, that they know every challenge and problem that they have, and so if they don't have a job description for it, it just means it doesn't exist. Well, that can't be further from the truth. And you'll find that most job seekers try to fit themselves into a job description, and they end up losing, half of their value add, because you're trying to fit yourself into something that somebody else designed.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So let's move on to the workplace environment. And what do I mean when I talk about the workplace environment? So this is the next step in really understanding what will ultimately decide your success. And it's going to be the workplace environment. It's going to, which is a combination of a lot of things, but it's basically the workplace value proposition or employer value proposition, whatever you want to call it. It's all going to happen in the workplace environment. Now, if you think about your success as a student or any challenges you had as a student, you were in a university environment. Okay, it's like a little ecosystem. Okay, so everything from the faculty and staff to fellow students to alumni to the courses you took to the companies that visited the school to where it was located, anything you can think of that made up that environment, it affected the way you studied. It affected the way you attended classes, all of the policies, class attendance policies, the way your projects were graded. These are things that affect your motivation to perform. Okay, it's the same thing as the workplace environment. And can you imagine if you had chosen the wrong university environment, that would really impact the way you learned. It would impact your job opportunities. It just impacts a lot of things. And so therefore you have to choose employers when you're looking at this transition from school to work. Don't be so hasty to just jump at the first job just because I understand in this type of market people want a job. You don't want to. You may feel you don't have the luxury to really investigate companies or to really take a lot of time deciding on an offer. You may feel that pressure to just take a job and then just hope for the best. You may have a strategy. You say, well, I'm only going to work at this company 1 or 2 years and then I'll leave. But I will caution you to make sure that you do the best that you can to choose the workplace environment that is going to allow you to be more successful. It all boils down to the workplace, okay? That is just the single most factor because everything is there. All the people, just as in school, or as in the school environment, you're going to have good classmates, you're going to have bad classmates, okay? You're going to have good professors, you're going to have bad professors. There's just no escaping that. And in the work world, it's no different. You're going to, and so what you don't want to do is get into an environment that will be so against your career brand, so against, actually impede how you can actually impact the company to where you ultimately don't have the success that you want. So looked at another way, as a 21st century consumer, you're more than likely using the internet and your social network to investigate products and services before you buy. So now you have to use those same tools to investigate employers before you apply, and definitely before you accept an offer, okay? So what I mean by that is, basically using, the LinkedIn's and the Glassdoor.com and Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and your alumni network and, fellow students and staff, everybody in your network to start learning about the workplace environment of the target companies that you would like to work for, okay? You can't just rely on employer ranking surveys and you can't rely on the companies that have the best, product brands because oftentimes that has nothing to do with their workplace environment, okay? Any questions? I'm going to move on to the next slide.
Nope, go ahead.
Okay. So now we're going to talk about the 7 traits for selecting target employers. And just a brief background, I just recently, over a period of 3 months, I did a benchmark of over 100 companies from the 2010's Best Employer Rankings surveys that were administered by Universum, Hay Group, Fortune magazine, and then some other companies that I selected that I worked with before. And what I did was I analyzed over 20 traits that I felt represents the workplace environment or the employer brand, employer value proposition of these companies. But today I'm just going to discuss 7 traits that you need to investigate in order to really select the right type of employer that will fit your needs, okay? So the first trait, we're going to look at the employee engagement report. Now, this report goes by a lot of names. It can be the organizational health survey. It can be the voice of the employee. It could be the global people survey. I mean, it has as many names as you can possibly think of, but it does the same thing. And basically what you want to do is you want to use this report to understand if a company has a dysfunctional workplace. Because it does you no good to enter into a company, knowingly, going into a company that has a very dysfunctional workplace. Now, as I told you, I benchmarked 102 companies. And even though this is an important metric, only, I would say, let me look at my statistics, less than 6% of the companies I benchmarked gave any type of usable metrics. And what I define as usable metrics is something that is what you're looking at on the screen. And even this is not very detailed to my satisfaction, but it was pretty much the best that I could find. And companies generally don't publish this data. Now, what you will find is that companies will publish maybe one little metric. So there were a lot of companies that published just a general metric saying, okay, 75% of our employees are engaged as of 2010. But that doesn't tell you anything. So what you need to do when you're looking at your target employers, you need to go a little deeper and you need to look at what these questions mean, okay? Now, what you're looking at on the screen is just a small sample of the questions that usually these surveys ask. Usually these surveys may have about 50 questions. And what happens is companies would just cherry pick the ones that are relatively decent, and then they'll publish those in the case that they publish these results, which is, as I've just told you, very rare. Only less than 6% of the companies out of 102, and these are I benchmarked the global top companies that everybody wants to work for, only 6% published in any type of detail like you see on the screen. But you need to look closely and look at these numbers and look at them year over year, and you want to try to see if there's any change for the worse, okay? And you want to see if there's change for the better, because that lets you know that there's some improvement in certain metrics that may be important for you. And you definitely want to see if the types of questions that the company makes available are questions that you may have about the workplace environment or about the company. Now, you're going to have to go a little deeper, okay? And I won't get into how deep you can go on this webinar. That may be for a separate webinar. But you will need to ask some deeper questions, because you're going to have to see the nature of the questions. You need to know how often this engagement report is given. You need to know what are the follow-up mechanisms the company has, or the company puts in place to try to rectify any numbers that are very low. And you need to understand that, because if you see that the survey, in some cases, these surveys are only given every 2 years. Now, to me, that's a very poor tactic, because things are changing so much that you really need to give this survey, either quarterly, or you need to give short pulse surveys. It could be 3 to 4 questions, but you need to constantly be engaged with what people are thinking and doing in the workplace. So these are just questions just for you to understand if your company or your target company really values what the workforce is saying, what the people are saying, and that would tell you a lot about the company. You see on here, things like respect for people, collaboration, how people feel about the leadership, would people recommend the company to their friends or other peers. This is very important to know, because if you see, and very rarely will you see a company publish any negative statistics, but if you're able to find out that only 50 or 60% of the people would recommend their company as an employer, that's a serious issue. And it doesn't mean that you don't pursue the company as a place to work, or you don't, take an offer if one is given. It just means that now you have something to discuss with the hiring manager or the recruiter, and you can at least ask questions to understand what's going on and if there are some mechanisms in place to correct that image, okay? Trait number 2. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Just going back to that engagement report, where can can people find this? Is this information publicly available on, say, company websites or something?
Yes, good question. All of these traits, and from all of the ones I've found, what you would find is that they're all on the career website, or I won't say the career. They're on the website somewhere. What happens is companies a lot of times don't even publish the data, so you have to hunt for it. So you really won't find it all the time just broken out or segmented in a way that you can just easily find it. You'll have to find it in the annual report, but it's mostly going to be in this company sustainability report or their corporate social responsibility report. Very rarely will you find it in the annual report. And some companies publish an HR, policy book or handbook, and they may make that available on their website. But you'll need to investigate all three of those areas. What you will find is that a lot of times it just won't be under the section where you would expect it. So you would expect it to be under the career section of the corporate website, but I've had to go onto other sections of the corporate website outside of the career portion just to be able to see if that information existed.
Mm-hmm. So you got to do a little digging, but it's there.
You have to do some digging, and it's there, but as I said, it was there 6% of the time. So the majority of the companies don't even publish it, and that's why you'll have to ask. And oftentimes, job seekers don't know to ask, or they don't think they can ask because they say, well, it wasn't available, so I'm just not going to ask. But if you need to ask, because it's nothing. I mean, it should be public because a lot of companies, do publish their results. It's almost suspicious if they don't publish it because it really is. It's an attraction tool. It's something that really does attract talented job seekers. It's a retention tool. So it's something that, as a job seeker, you would be really happy to see if you see good results. That hey, 85% of employees believe that the workplace is very collaborative, or that the work place is has respect for people, or 90% of the people think leadership is going in the right direction. That's a good thing. So you would want to publish that, but at least ask, just so that you don't walk into a bad environment.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. The next thing now we get into trait number 2, which is your work-life balance. If you value telecommuting and flex time, or leaves of absence, or sabbaticals, or child care benefits, I mean the whole gamut of any type of work-life benefit, you really need to ask the questions, because I'm going to go back to my research again. Less than 2% of the 102 companies that I benchmarked actually publish any usable data. And what I call usable data is what you see on the screen. Other companies, they just said, well, we have work-life benefits, and they listed a whole bunch of benefits, but it was just text. Okay, I'm just saying, hey, we have these benefits. What you need to do is start understanding that just because a company has the benefits, it doesn't mean that you're going to have access to them. I mean, it just means they have them. So you have to start asking the deeper questions, because think about it. There may be a certain policy, and it may say, well, you have access to telecommute only after working 2 years at the company, or you have access to flex time only if you're in a certain department, or before you can be granted a sabbatical, you have to go through XYZ hoops, and you have to get approval by the VP, and you have to go through. I mean, there are all these different things that, as a job seeker, you're making this transition from school to work, and you just assume that, well, if it's published on the website, I'm going to automatically just be able to benefit. And I can assure you that every employee doesn't get to benefit a flexible work schedule. Every employee is not going to be able to take a 1-year paid sabbatical, okay, or to be able to take a personal leave, or to be able to, do something with child care or elderly care. I mean, these things, they have certain policies and procedures. So what you want to do is to try to understand if the company really embraces these work-life benefits that they offer, or is it just like a Venus flytrap? If it's just to attract you, but then once you're on the job, and then you say, I wish I'd asked, I should have asked that question before I took the job. Also, you'll find that in a lot of companies that you can almost damage your career if the company really doesn't embrace the work-life benefits. For example, if you are telecommuting or you're working a flexible schedule, then sometimes that can be a career derailer, because if the company thinks that, okay, well, you're a slacker or you just want to work this flex time for whatever reason, and you're not in the office, because you have to look at most companies are still based on this old model where, you know, they want to see you physically in the office. And so if you're not physically in the office, that means, you know, we don't know if you're doing work for sure, okay? So that's why you have a lot of people still thinking that, okay, I have to be in the office or I have to be connected to video showing that I'm doing something. So you want to make sure that you ask the types of questions to say, well, who exactly takes advantage of these benefits? Okay, so it isn't enough to just know the company offers the benefits. You need to ask, okay, can you tell me who are the people that take these benefits? And not just based on, you know, gender or nationality or anything like that, but the level they are in the company. So I would feel more comfortable knowing that, you know, the executive director of the company also telecommutes, or, you know, a VP, they've taken a leave of absence. I mean, when you see it valued at the higher levels of the company, you can see that, okay, this won't derail my career, because, you know, people at the top of the company, they're taking advantage of the benefits too. My supervisor, my director, managers. But if you see that it's not the norm for the leaders to take advantage of these types of benefits, and you start saying, wait a minute, so who's taking these benefits? And are these people able to advance their careers, or is there a kind of a covert culture that possibly punishes you if you take a one-year leave of absence, and or you take a leave, a pregnancy leave, or you need to see what types of programs the company has in place to make sure that, you know, this is not going to be a career derailer, that they really value work-life balance as a means of refreshing you, as a means for you to, you know, add some additional value to you that will be added to the company. Now, Intel and Hewlett-Packard are two of the, I mean, maybe 4 or 5 companies, I mean, very, very few that actually publish any usable data. And even the data they publish, it could be more detailed, but it's far better than what I found with the other companies, okay? Okay, any questions? Okay.
No.
Okay, so just look at that and just gives you an idea. When you see that if a Hewlett-Packard, they say 80% take advantage of their flexible work time, that's a pretty high number. And so it at least gives you a basis to ask questions, okay? So all of this is meant for you to ask questions, because when you don't ask the right questions, you really do put yourself in a bad situation. So the more information you can gather beforehand, before choosing an employer, then the better the questions you'll be able to ask that can help you make the right decision, okay? Now, volunteering and social investments, trait 3. So volunteering and social investments is all the rage, right? Everybody has it on their website now, because they know that, you know, millennials, you know, the Gen Y job seekers are attracted to this, as well as, you know, some Gen Xers and other generations. But really, this was the honey trap for the millennials, because there's, you know, just widespread that they're more apt to be into social causes. Well, this is all good, but what you don't want is a company that really doesn't embrace volunteering and social investments, okay? You don't want to choose a company that has all of these wonderful volunteering, you know, social investments, all of these, you know, companies, they are nonprofit organizations that they support, or community activities they're involved in, but they truly don't embrace it in the corporate sense, or in the business sense. Because think about it. If you really value volunteering and you choose a company based on that, and then when you get there, you try to you know, get engaged in some volunteering activity, but you find that it's a bureaucratic process, that's going to be a nightmare. And just like I talked about with the work-life benefits, if you find that the company doesn't really value volunteering, okay? Because see, with volunteering and social investments, the company has to have a business value for it. They need to say, okay, well, the types of organizations that we support, the community activities that we support, are in line with our business goals, and here are the metrics to prove it. Here's how we measure the impact to our business with these specific investments in the community or in specific nonprofit organizations. You also need to see how are the employees who volunteer, how are they treated, how are they valued, how is it measured. So you want to ask questions. You want to say, okay, well, is volunteering where is it recognized? You know, how is it, where does it show up? So if I volunteer, will that be something that's included in your performance evaluations, for example, okay? You want to see that if you volunteer, if you take 15 hours a week, for example, to volunteer for an organization, is that 15 hours going to be valued just as much as the 15 hours that you work on your primary projects for the company? Because that's a very important question, and it should be. And so you know, the time that you volunteer for an organization that's supported by the company, it should be just as valuable as the work that you do for the company, because volunteering is professional development. But if the company doesn't look at it like that, if the company only has the volunteering and social investments, if they have these programs just as an attraction tool, just a talent attraction tool, then it's going to be hard to retain people like you if this is something you really value and you see that the company really doesn't value it, okay? So again, Barclays was one of the few companies that really gave some detail on how they value volunteering and, you know, investments in the community. And so you want to look for companies that publish this information. Again, this is all on the website, or it should be in any of the documents such as the annual report, the corporate social responsibility report, any HR policy handbooks, or anywhere on the website, okay? There were about 10% of the companies I benchmarked that provided some usable data that was detailed in this format, okay? Now, trait number 4, career mobility and development. Okay, now given today's environment where you have such global competition, you have companies moving, you know, assets abroad and doing all of these different things in different countries, you want to know what is the company's commitment to career mobility and development, okay, because this is going to directly affect you as a new employee. Imagine the case where you're working for a company and you know, they're based in France, for example, but all of their 80% of their income is coming from Brazil. So you would like to know, would there be an opportunity for you to move to Brazil to work, because that's where the money is going, right? That's where the investment, that's where the growth is. So you need to know, is there going to be a lot of politics for you to move? Is it a difficult, you know, thing to request a transfer to another, you know, market, or do you have to be at a certain career level? Again, what happens with a lot of job seekers when they transition from school to work, they automatically assume that, well, this company says that they value, you know, that they have career mobility and development programs, and that a lot of, you know, employees work abroad, and you can, you know, you have the opportunity to work in all of these countries, but that doesn't mean that you are going to work there. Excuse me. What you have to dig down is to say, okay, how can I see if my profile, if my career brand, if my value add is the type that a company will invest in to work across borders, to work in different markets. And also you want to see what type of investment they'll make in you in terms of language training or any type of intercultural training. Because if you take a job thinking that, okay, you know, I'm, you know, French, and, you know, I want to work in China, then you may say, well, does the company have any type of policy that says, well, you have to work at least 5 years before we transfer you to another country, if you don't hire directly into that other country, or you have to be fluent in the language before you transfer to another country, or you have to get a supervisor's recommendation and all of this, and you have to be at a certain career level. All of these different things that you won't see published on the website, okay? They'll just say that we have all of this. So it's in your best interest to ask those questions, okay? Now, when I talk about development, what I talk about is the training, like formal training and performance management evaluations, okay? Now, if you don't see that on the website, how often a company does its performance evaluations, ask. It's very important, okay? Because you don't want to work for a company that, first of all, doesn't have performance evaluations, because then how would you know how you're doing, and how would you be compensated or rewarded in terms of, you know, professional development or salary if no one can validate your contribution to the company? So knowing the performance evaluation scheme, knowing what type of formal training that you can receive, that's very important. What you see here on the screen is that companies tend to use these broad percentages, and this is about as detailed as I could find for most of the companies, and they'll break down, pure numbers of, okay, here's how many people receive the performance evaluation, or here's the percentage that are working abroad. You just need to ask some deeper questions. There were about 10% of the companies, 10% of the companies that I benchmarked that provided usable data, but you need to go a little deeper and just start asking those questions about, well, how often are the performance evaluations, and what is the typical follow-up to the performance evaluations. So if it happens that you need a certain type of training, or you lack a certain type of development, what is the company's response? Do they offer that within that calendar year, or how do they help you to achieve a certain goal? I would caution you to be sure that you ask companies about their performance evaluations, how frequently they're given. 2 per year is a minimum, in my opinion, because once a year, that's just too long. I mean, you're going to have informal evaluations, and you should have informal discussions with your manager or your supervisor, but I would rather have a twice per year performance evaluation, because so much changes. I mean, things are moving so fast, okay? So let's look at trait number 5, which is diversity and inclusion. And what you will find is that diversity and inclusion has different meanings to different people, to different countries, to different nations. I mean, it's all over the place. So there's no one-size-fits-all definition. But what you need to do is to understand your own definition for diversity and inclusion. And if you look at the university environment, if you think about what diversity and inclusion meant for you as a student, and if you had the fortune to be in a diverse class of people with different genders and different nationalities and different sexual orientation, different educational backgrounds, different experiences. I mean, the whole gamut of diversity and inclusion. And if you had to work in teams with these people, and it really challenged the way that you thought about the world. So if you grew to appreciate that, then it's something that you should look for in a company. Now, what happens is the diversity that you have in the university environment, it usually is hard to find in a corporate environment because it's going to depend where you work. But what you want to look for is that from a diversity standpoint, you want to see, okay, if I look across various levels of the company, and would I have a chance, do I see that this company, promotes people, or this is a company that, I could, really climb to the top at, or would that be difficult for me depending on what country I'm in or what type of company I work for? So I take the example of, the best case for diversity would be, imagine a German CEO at a Chinese company, or, a Russian CEO at a Brazilian company. I mean, something to where you say, okay, well, that's just so far out. So this company truly, anybody can make it, because if people from different nationalities are, making up, working at different levels of the companies, different genders, different, races, different, people from different educational backgrounds. It would be nice if you knew the educational backgrounds of people at different levels of the organizations, because that's a good way for you to network. Imagine the CEO has a background in biology, and you say, wow, I do too. So, I never thought a biology person could make it in this tech company, make it that high. And so it gives you the motivation to know that, hey, it's all about what you know, not about what you studied or anything like that. It's about how you apply that to a company. So you're going to have to dig deep and look at what your definition of diversity and inclusion is, and ask the company. So this gives you the foundation to just ask questions, to say, okay, so what types of inclusion parameters are at this company in terms of, because somebody like me with a non-traditional background, what are my chances for working in certain parts of the company, or working in, outside of the national borders of where the headquarters are, or what have you. And again, you won't find very detailed information on, diversity and inclusion that may satisfy what you want, but at least look at what the company provides, and then you can ask questions based on that, okay? So, trait number 6, Web 2.0 technologies. This is actually one of my, favorite. I can't say it's the most important, because they're all important, but I'll tell you this. In today's world, given the preponderance of, the ubiquity, I should say, of social media, it would be a shame to work for a company that didn't have this available on their intranet, or a company that was trying to block these technologies. And you'd be surprised. There's still a lot of companies that don't know what to do with Web 2.0 technologies. So there were very few companies, fewer than 2%, that actually published. Now, there are a lot of companies that said we have Web 2.0 technologies, whether they were proprietary Web 2.0 technologies or they were taking advantage of LinkedIn or Facebook. But the fact is, look for companies that take advantage of Web 2.0 technologies, because this is a business tool. This is the height of collaboration. And so you don't want to work for a company that is not comfortable with, the very thing that you use in your social life and your personal life to get information and to collaborate. If they don't use it as a business tool, then that's an issue. You at least want to question that, because this is something that's very important to your career, okay? So let's look at the company that does have something to offer, which is National Instruments. This was the only company that really gave some detail about the way they use the Web 2.0 and the way their employees use it. So you can rest assured that this company gets it, okay? Intel and Cisco, they also have internal networks. They just didn't list any details, okay? Now, the final trait is recognition and compensation. So the recognition is basically this. You want to work for a company that has programs in place, basically a meritocracy. Basically, you want to work for a company that is going to recognize you if you go above and beyond the call of duty, okay? You want to work for a company that not only just gives you a pat on the back, but also has rewards and, different types of financial and non-financial compensation schemes for the people that do these extraordinary things. And you want to look for the companies that ties this into their performance evaluations, okay? Intel was one of the companies that listed this, one of the very few that listed at least the programs they have in place, but they didn't list any statistics. And again, this was, there were no objective, they list like less than 1% of employees receive one of these awards a year, but they didn't list any workforce-wide objectives. So this is something that you still want to look for and ask questions about. And the final slide just has to do more with compensation. Unilever just talked about how they do their annual bonus scheme and different performance plans, how you can get rewards based on your contribution and the success of the company, but nothing really, there's no information that really goes into detail. So again, this is information that you at least want to ask about, and just ask about how the company decides who gets recognized and who gets compensated. So you want to know, are there some exact targets that you have to meet, or do you have to be at certain levels of the company? Because oftentimes you see this and you think, oh, I can get into the bonus pool, but you don't realize it may be for people at certain levels of the company. So you may have to wait 2 or 3 years before you can even get into the bonus pool or to get any type of compensation. And given today's work environment and the way people change jobs, you may not even be at the company 3 years. So it's something to see. Something to ask about when you have this type of data. And that's all.
Great. Thanks a lot, Roderick.
Okay.
So just a couple questions. Touching back on the trait on Web 2.0 technologies.
Okay.
Do you have any key technology tools that a lot of companies, I guess, are using these days?
Yeah, so basically what most companies are using are just knockoffs of, Facebook and LinkedIn. Those are the big ones. And I would say more so, LinkedIn from the professional standpoint, because what companies want to do is build this global collaboration. They finally get it that, all of the innovation and creativity, it's not going to just come from within. So when you unleash the power of your workforce and you allow people to collaborate across borders, especially internal, when you look at these big companies, imagine if I work for, Intel and I'm based in California and I can communicate with colleagues in China or Romania or, any other country. That collaboration, that access to knowledge, I can post a question, I can post a project, and I can get the same feedback and advice as you would get like on a LinkedIn or a Facebook. So some companies have adapted LinkedIn and Facebook for their own needs, but some, like the big high-tech ones like LinkedIn and Cisco, they've built their own proprietary networks that work just like LinkedIn and Facebook. So they're just internal to the company, but they have the same functionality. You can upload video. I mean, you have like voice over IP. You can put group discussions, and you just imagine the productivity just from having access to all of these people that are outside of your specific location or your office where you work. I mean, you can't even imagine the type of productivity you can have with that.
Yeah. Okay, great. So just one final question. Based on your experience coaching and guiding individuals through this transition, are there any common, I guess, struggles that you often see, and how can people avoid these?
Yeah, I think the common thing, it just goes back to people don't know themselves. You know, especially coming out of school, because you spent so much time studying, you know, or completing projects, that was the major investment. So adding the degree, whether it's an MBA or what have you, that becomes the major investment. And so people forget to say, okay, now I've added this you know, wonderful tool, but how do I make it work? You know, how do I merge it with what I do best and what I like to do? And so people don't take the time to do that, because they usually say, okay, now it's time to search for a job. So it's like, you know, you get through a certain portion of your degree, and you say, okay, now I just have to search for jobs. And you forget to define who you are first, and then let that dictate the types of employers that you search for, or the types of employers that you target. And you shouldn't have a big list. There shouldn't be 50 companies that you want to work for. There really should be like a small basket of companies, and you should be able to, you know, start building some networks with those companies. And based on your career brand, you know, based on taking time to work with your, you know, career consultant, or, you know, peers, or you know, there are a number of tools to help you define your career brand. And you start looking at these companies, and you start saying, you know, with these companies, I stand out. Okay? Now, with every company, you're not going to stand out. But if you define your career brand, you'll say, you know, with these particular companies, I stand out. I can actually, you know, make a difference with these companies. My background is going to be more attractive to these companies than it will to other companies, and I'll probably be more competitive as a job seeker with these companies than the average student.
Right. Okay, great. So I think that's it for now. Thank you so much, Roderick, for hosting this webinar with us.
Okay.
I'd highly recommend to everyone to check out voiceofthejobseeker.com, Roderick's site. There's a ton of great tips and resources on there as you make the transition. And you can also book your one-on-one session with Roderick through Evisors. So if you just skip to the last slide, the links will be there. And we'll also be posting a recording of this webinar on our Facebook site as well. So, Roderick, any final thoughts as we sign off?
Yeah, so to everyone listening to this webinar, I encourage you to take the time to know your value add first, and then research the companies. Don't be afraid to ask the questions, okay? Don't be afraid to search for information that's not there, because this is a huge step for you. This is a very important step. And choosing the right employer is just as important as choosing the right university. So you want to give yourself a good start, and you want to ask the right questions, and you want to make the best out of the situations that you find yourself in. And you will find that companies are generally open to answering those questions. And you'll probably stand out because you're going to ask the key questions that really show that you want to make an impact. So every trait that I listed is based on you wanted to make, you know, an impact at the company, and you wanted to make sure that it's a good match for you, because your brand. You think of yourself as a product brand, you're a career brand, and you want to make sure that the work environment of the company is going to accommodate that, so that you can maximize the returns on the company's investment in you.
Right. That's great advice. Thanks a lot, Roderick, and thank you everyone for listening, and have a great weekend.
All right. Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.